Hello and welcome back. I'm Gabby Bissett and I'm so pleased to have you tune in to another episode of Dentistry Talks. We are honoured to welcome Andy Price, a vocal advocate for mental health within the veteran community. Andy started up the Veterans Hub in 2017 and today brings invaluable insights on the importance of peer-to-peer support and how dental practices can foster a strong sense of community within their teams. In this episode, we'll explore what community means to Andy, the turning points in his journey, and how mental health support has evolved over the years. We'll also discuss how dental practices can better support their team's well-being and serve veteran patients. Andy, hello. Thank you for joining us today.
That's right. Thanks for having me.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, really good.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to our conversation today, mostly revolving around community and mental health, and I think you're really well placed to have these discussions with us and relay some advice and some of your experience to the audience, and I think they'll be able to take a lot away from our conversation today. So thank you. Before we've even began, I just wanted to say that.
All right, thank you. I really appreciate that.
So just to kick us off, I wanted to ask, for you, what is community?
Community to me is just people coming together for a common purpose and working together for the greater cause. You know, whether that's looking after each other, or just being there for each other. That's community to me. That is community.
Yeah.
You know, working together, looking after each other. You know, all for the greater good, really.
I feel it's been a common theme in your journey and your career and your experiences, and I wanted to just kind of go back to the beginning, if that's okay with you,
Yeah.
and learn a little bit about you and your background. So obviously you were in the army, so
Yeah.
do you want to tell us a little bit about how that came about and what your time there was like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was a late bloomer in the army.
Okay.
I didn't join
What's that look like?
Well, so I didn't join until when I was 23, 24.
Okay, and that's quite late, is it?
Yeah,
Oh,
it is.
okay,
Yeah, you know, a lot
interesting.
of people join at 16, 17,
Okay,
18.
that makes more sense, yeah.
And my journey was a little bit of a confused one. So if I backtrack, my childhood, which was amazingly good, so I've got no complaints there, but I was a bit wayward. Okay, so I grew up in London. I got kicked out of school. I failed at every level. I got involved with the wrong people. I was heavily into drugs, petty crime, getting into fights. Yeah, well, it wasn't really me, but I was kind of in that kind of crowd.
Yeah, of course.
Eventually, I tried to move away from that, so I moved away from London down to the south coast, thinking it would be a good fresh start. And what I didn't realise at the time was, so you wherever you go, you're drawn to similar people. So actually, as soon as I got down to the south coast, where I thought it was going to be amazing, you know, I'd watched Baywatch. So I thought, you know, I'm going to Weymouth. That's all I could think about. I thought, I'm going to be on the beach. They're all going to love me because I'm from London.
Yeah, that's true.
You know,
You're right there.
and that is it, you know. But actually, I got drawn to the same sort of crowds.
Okay.
So I ended up, in a short space of time, getting involved again with the wrong people, getting into fights, being arrested, being involved in drugs again. And I think I got to the age of about 23, 24. And it was like, without sounding like cliche, it was like a light bulb moment. I literally asked myself, you know, what am I doing with my life? So I thought I needed a complete and utter change. At the time, I'd become good friends with someone who was ex-parachute regiment.
Okay.
And I was talking to him in the pub. And I said to him, I think, you know, I'm going to join the army. And he said, he advised against it. He said, my attitude was wrong. I was too old. He said, you won't be able to take the discipline. He said, I can't think of anything worse for you. So I was like, cheers for that, thank you.
Did that spur you on a bit?
Yeah, it did.
Yeah, I thought it
So
might.
interestingly, and a lot of people watching this who have been in the armed forces will laugh at this. I ended up joining what was known as the Territorial Army originally, because he had gone from being a regular soldier to joining the TA, and he said, you know, why don't you come and just try this out with me, see what you think of the basics, and if you like it, we can go on from there. So I did that. I joined the local Army Reserve unit.
Yeah.
And I loved it. Had a cheap bar. Everyone seemed to be a good crack there. And I immediately bonded with everyone there. But unbeknown to me, this was the start of the war in the Middle East.
Okay.
So 2003, at the beginning of that, I walked into an Army Reserve Centre thinking it would just be a bit of a groundner for me.
Yeah.
And at the end of 2003, I found myself in Kabul
Okay.
on what was then peacekeeping operations.
Okay.
And, you know, to be fair, I loved it, every part of it. You
Yeah.
know, I loved being part of a team. I loved being in a new country. I loved meeting people. I loved the culture. And I fell hook, line and sinker as well for the whole we're coming here to give them freedom.
Yes.
So, you know, I fell for it, or it partly it was true anyway. But
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, of course.
and I really enjoyed it, and I was having the best time of my life. And then in 2004, my call sign was involved in a contact, and my friend became the first fatality of that war.
Okay.
Okay, so a suicide bomber drove into the side of his vehicle, killed him instantly. I think there's 5 other injuries, all life-changing injuries. And that was kind of like a really big eye-opener.
I can imagine.
So, you know, I'm going on a bit, but the thing here is, shortly after that, we came home to the UK. And in the regular army, you'd go back to a unit. You would be surrounded by your peers. Being a reserve unit, or territorial army as it was then, we were picked up from Brize Norton. Didn't see the other lads again, and I was dropped off at a garage like 7 miles from my family house. Right, with all my kit, had to use a payphone to get a lift. Back there, with no way to explain or deal with what I'd seen and witnessed. And it'd been quite a traumatic time.
Oh, yeah.
So I suddenly found myself like lost, alone, not really understanding what had happened. And also missing everyone that I'd been with.
Of course.
So I then started to drink heavily again.
Yeah.
And get into trouble again. I then heard on the sort of grapevine that my company or my unit was going back to Afghanistan. So I said, right, I'll go back to Afghanistan. So I did that, and this time we ended up in Helmand, which, and everyone's seen, you know, I'm not going to bang on about that, everyone's seen that in the news, everyone knows what that was like. We all had different experiences there. You know, some people were fighting, some weren't, you know, but it just wasn't the best place, you know. I came back from there, and then I was like, I really can't fit into life here. So I volunteered to go again. So I went back to Helmand, did another 6-7 months, it turned out to be, down there, and came back again. And in between them tours, I had met someone and got married. Okay. But what she had seen throughout the course of 2 tours and a little bit before that was a gradual decline in my behaviour. So she was like, I was becoming really distant, I was really angry, I was drinking, I was isolating myself from people around me. I'd started self-harming as well, quite drastically. So she kind of did this, made a call. She said, you know, if our marriage is going to survive, if you're going to survive, you can't go away again. You've got to hand in your kit.
For sure.
And in another light bulb moment, I said, yeah, brilliant, I'll do that, because I loved her. You know, and she said to me, what are you going to do now? And I said, well, funnily enough, I've got contact within a security company. And she said, brilliant, where's that going to take you? And I went, Helmand.
Oh, no.
So I swapped like one uniform for another, and I went back to Helmand as a close protection officer working for the British Embassy for about 3 years. I was rarely home. I think I did 12 weeks away, 3 weeks at home, something like that. Earned a lot of money, but became more and more withdrawn. I was injured twice, 2 like head injuries. I lost some more friends. So I came home from there. She said to me, you'll stop going to Afghanistan. So I went, brilliant, I'll go to Iraq instead. So I went out there, did the same work, but did 2.5 years there. My marriage ultimately fell apart. I met someone else, because that's just what we do. And she said, I don't want us to go down the same route that you went with your ex. So I never want you to go to the Middle East again. I went, superb. She went, where are you going to go? I said, to Libya. I said, like, you know, and she said, Libya.
So,
I said, it's on the Med. I said, so it's not the Middle East, is it?
So obviously there's, you've had, that's quite a lot happened to you in, I know we're talking about years here, but really compared, when you look at the sort of the average life, it's quite a small amount of time that you went through an awful lot very quickly, and you were returning to, what was it that was bringing you back there? Was it just where you felt like you had a purpose? What was it that
Yeah.
appealed so much?
Yeah, I think so. You know, because I laugh about the way I see things.
Yeah.
But actually, it really wasn't funny because, unbeknown to me at the time,
Yeah.
and this may resonate with some of the people listening to this, you know, I started to get anxious about coming back to the UK. So where I should be anxious about going to a war zone, I was actually suffering anxiety about coming back here.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't want to come back here. You know, as soon as I came back here, I'd unpack my bag, clean everything, pack it again, and be on the phone to one of the head offices, you know, HR team and ops room, saying, you know, can I come back out? And I absolutely hated it. But when I was away, I felt like I was someone doing something.
Yeah.
And I ended up becoming more accustomed to being there than I did back here. And this felt really alien to me. And I just couldn't handle it.
Yeah.
You know, and then fast track, like two tours of Libya, you know, working privately. Somewhere around that time, I can't remember when it was, you know, I lost 2 friends to suicide. Both guys that I looked up to, you know, I looked at them, held them in high regard.
Yeah.
And I came back from my second stint in Libya, and by then we'd had a daughter, and we were having dinner, we sat around this table, and I was thinking about my friends, and I was thinking, if they couldn't make it, what is it? You know, everything started hitting me, the drinking, the self-harm, the damage I was doing to my family. You know, me being irresponsible because I wasn't saving any money, you know. I was just going out there, getting money and living the life of a rock star, and not giving a damn about my family, my daughter or anything like that. And it was like, I just thought the only way to get through this is to kill myself. Okay, so I made a plan. So I started paying off bills. I started putting money to one side. I wrote a letter.
Okay.
And my plan was to go back to Libya and kill myself there.
Okay.
Try to make it look like an accident so my life insurance would pay out. And that's the whole plan I had because I knew another guy who had done that overseas as well. So I thought, this is what I'm going to do. But ironically, that made me really happy. And my family saw a massive change in me.
Right.
And for them, that was a indicator that something was wrong.
Okay.
So they intervened. They said, you know, I didn't realise at the time, but I was openly talking about suicide to them and talking about the benefits of it.
This period of, obviously, your mental health was extremely fragile at this time. Were you, obviously you've got the benefit of hindsight now and you can kind of look back with a lot of clarity. But at the time, did you understand what it was that you were going, were you self-aware? Did you know that these kinds of, obviously you say, you know, there was self-harm was involved, you were anxious to come back to the UK, all these kinds of, what a lot of people would think quite obvious signs of not doing okay. Were you aware of that at the time?
Absolutely not, no. I felt that was part of the lifestyle I'd chosen.
Yeah.
So I felt this was, and I thought, if I can't succeed in the life I've chosen for myself, and if I really can't make my family happy, and if I cannot sort of bring myself to be part of another life, you know, come back and get a normal job or whatever it is that's classed as normal. Yeah. There's no point being here. So I didn't really see what everyone else could see. I just thought, this is normal. I'm either going to die over there anyway, so why not go over there, take my own life, and then leave, some kind of money for my kid. Yeah. And that was it. But my family, because of the way I was behaving, and then I started openly talking about suicide and not really realising I was doing it. Yeah. They kind of jumped the gun and they informed my company that I was working for. So my company grounded me, said you're not flying out. Yeah. Which was a double-edged sword because even though I knew they were doing it because they loved me, by stopping me from going back to my work, that just compounded everything for me. And then I became a danger to myself. Yeah. And that's kind of where everything rolled on from there. Okay.
Yeah. It's obviously very unique. Probably not unique maybe in the veteran community, but obviously very different to dentistry, your career and your experiences. But we've discussed this previously when we spoke before this conversation, that there are a lot of similarities and a lot of parallels we can draw, and in that you obviously you were working and you were experiencing what is essentially a mental health crisis, I think is fair to say, and you thought that was just how it is. That's just something that was part of the job that you're in. And I can imagine there's a lot of people watching and listening who may not be experiencing something quite as severe or as significant, but may just downplay certain symptoms or feelings that they're having as just inevitable, just something. And what would you say to those people who feel like that?
Firstly, it's all relative.
Yeah.
You know, like I said earlier on, it's all relative. You know, a big problem to you might be a small problem to me. And in dentistry, I mean, I did a little bit of research, to be fair, and it is a high pressure job.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
And if you're running a practice on your own, there's a lot of people relying on you, and it's long hours. You know, and it's okay. They get paid, but it's a thankless sort of task, isn't it? And I was reading about the drinking statistics as well. A lot of people drink and stuff like that. You know, so what I would say is this. You know, it's if you hurt yourself, if you strain an ankle, you break a finger, you know, you cut yourself by accident, you know, you don't sit there and wait until it festers and becomes infected and becomes worse. You go and get some support straight away. And I think the same with mental health. I think, you know, there is still a kind of stigma attached to it, especially around men. But I do feel strongly that, you know, if we can deal with things in the early stages, we can stop it getting to, say, the later stages, like what I was, or people within the dentistry commission, you know, that have taken their own lives, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Got to, I think, dealing with it earlier is the key thing. But for that to happen, you know, people have got to feel comfortable about talking about it. And also, we need to have a lot more, just not open conversations about mental health, but we need to educate people about mental health as well. And explain to them, you know, that each of us individually, we might have, say, take depression, for example. You could have 10 people suffering from depression in the same room, but each one of them will experience it differently. So one of them will be smiling all the time, getting up and going to work. Another one won't be getting out of bed and doing nothing.
It's very specific to the person, isn't it?
100%. And a lot of people don't realise that as well. You know,
when you were going through this period, it sounds like it's not a secret that it's quite widely affected. Veterans in particular are quite widely affected by mental health struggles, and it sounds like you lost a lot of people either through their own struggles or just through being in at war. You set up the Veterans Hub. What was it that? First of all, what is that? Would you mind just explaining a little bit about that? And what was the purpose behind that?
So firstly, I've got to say more. I've got to make this clear because a lot of people seem to think veterans, we're all nuts. Okay, and we're all damaged, and we're not. More veterans than not succeed in life, go on to leave. You know, really fulfilling lives, productive lives. You know, but sadly, too many do, for the obvious reasons, do struggle with mental and physical injuries. But the hub came about. The hub's basically a community project established by myself and a few other veterans, but it's for the whole community. And the idea was we wanted to create a space where people going through similar experiences can come together and support each other in a non-clinical environment. That's primarily what we were doing because, you know, I felt when I first became ill and my family intervened, they took me to a lot of different services to get support, okay? And a lot of services just said, they just went, we don't know what to do with him.
Really?
Yeah, a lot of doors were closing on me, you know. There's a really big military charity, I won't say the name, but they assessed me and said, you're too complex for us to support.
How did that feel to hear that?
I at that stage, I was unable to talk anyway, so I had a partner speaking on my behalf.
Okay.
And I thought, if they can't help me, then I just need to not be here. Yeah. So I became a flight risk. And then what happened was, and they won't like me saying this if ever they see this, but a really good friend of mine from America who's a US Marine, or was, I spent 17 months embedded with US Marines.
Okay.
And this particular person, she took some time out and came over to me and my family, so my partner could carry on going to work, get the kids to school. And
that's incredible.
She took about 3 months spent with us, and throughout 3 months we did a lot of walking and talking. She took me to appointments, but most of it was walking and talking. And that was the best therapy I've ever had in my life, being able to voice what I was feeling, someone who understood it, understood the language, had been involved in similar situations. That was the way forward for me. And then when it came time for her to return back to America, I said to her, I don't really know what I'm going to do now. And she told me about similar groups in America.
Okay.
And she said, why don't you do something like this? And naively, actually, I said, it won't work because I've never met anyone else going through this.
Okay.
Which I had done, but I just thought it wouldn't work. And so we decided to take a chance. I opened up the hub one night a week, 2 hours. I hired this little coffee shop from a disabilities group, actually.
Okay.
Hired the coffee shop and just said, if you're a veteran family member or you're still serving and you just want to come down and have a brew, have a chat, we're here. And the first night we opened, I remember my partner saying to me, if you get one person rock up, you've succeeded.
Yep.
We had 15 people rock up on the first night, which blew my mind. I mean, one of them was a guy that became a really good friend.
Yeah.
And for weeks we'd been walking past each other, walking our dogs, scowling at each other, staring at the floor, being really angry with each other. And it turned out we were going through
the same stuff. Yeah.
And it became a lifeline.
That's incredible.
And it grew legs.
Yeah.
It was once a week, and that it was always going to be once a week. But then sadly, we lost 2 people in the space of about 5 days through suicide.
Okay.
And what really struck me was I was talking to the daughter of one of them gentlemen who died, and she sort of wondered if there had been a full-time project, would her dad still have been here? Which you can't say yes or no to that.
Yeah, it's yeah.
So we decided to take a leap of faith, and we found a coffee shop and we opened a full-time hub.
That's amazing.
And it's just grown legs since then.
Yeah. It was 2017, was it? You set this up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and 2018 full-time.
Wow.
And we've got we've got a team, 7 paid staff. We've got about 25 volunteers. We've got gardens. We've got a purpose-built gym, allotments, treatment rooms, welfare office, coffee shop, everything.
Yeah.
But the big emphasis there is community. We don't turn anyone away. Yeah. So even though we have a coffee shop and we got barista coffee and everyone's barista trained, etc. If someone's got no money or they're feeling alone or they're going through a tough time, we'd rather they came in and didn't pay for anything, but they had company or somewhere safe to be. So that's how the place works, and that's what the hub is.
Something that stuck with me that you said earlier is that one of the reasons why it was so helpful to have your friend from the US come and visit was because they'd gone through something similar. They could relate to things you'd said. They knew you said the language and some of the experience you might have had. She might have had also. Do you think that's really crucial to have these kinds of people within your own workspace to connect with? Because I think sometimes it can be really hard for family members who may have a sister, a father, a nephew, a niece who's going through something and they feel that they're quite isolated. But you said that what really helped you was having somebody who had that similar experience. And are those parallels, do you think, really important to have?
I think it's crucial.
Yeah.
I really do. I think it's absolutely crucial. I mean, talking's the way forward, firstly. I think, sort of, I don't want to throw percentages in there, but a large proportion of mental health problems can be solved by talking. They don't need medication. You don't need to be admitted to hospital. You don't need to be in a clinical environment. You just need to be able to talk to someone who will listen. Yeah. You don't want them to talk back at you. You just need them to listen. Yeah. And I think that's crucial. And they need to understand. So, like, if you're talking about, dentistry, which is what this podcast is about, imagine having like a forum where people in your dentistry profession could just come and sound off, talk to each other, or somewhere they could meet every, say, month or 2 months if they wanted to, just to talk about things. Because you feel very alone when you're told you've got a mental health problem. Actually, you're not. All of us are going to struggle with our mental health at some point. Being able to talk to people from the same industry, same background, makes a hell of a difference. In regards to families, they're often forgotten about. But they struggle as much, So I was diagnosed with CPTSD, EUPD, and all this other funky stuff and given about 2 million tablets, But everyone was like, let's help Andy, yeah? Everyone forgot about my partner at the time. And she's not my partner now, our relationship broke down again. But everyone forgot about her, they forgot about my daughter. And actually, they're really crucial as well.
Yeah,
they're key to it.
Yeah.
Because they're essentially carers.
Yeah.
And they're the ones that are watching from the outside a loved one fall apart.
Yeah.
So, we now have a carers group as well for children and partners. So and families come together to talk and support each other because that's part of it. And it'd be the same in every single profession. Whether that's blue light services, NHS services, any service actually, to be fair, we all suffer stresses, but it's always good to talk to people that understand your language and what you're talking about.
I think as well, having perhaps a designated space that the purpose is for talking and being together, and whether it's in an informal way. I know you said, I know we spoke prior to this, you said there's like you got TVs and things there, just places to sort of space to chill out, is that right?
Yeah, no, that was way back in the end of the world days, pandemic days, when we thought the world was ending.
I see.
And we had to create some spaces for people that were at risk, high risk. They were considered high risk because they were living by themselves. They had quite acute mental health injuries. So having them stuck away for 12 weeks, it was deemed that perhaps they wouldn't come out the other side.
Yeah.
So we created spaces for them. So, but the hub, what we've got now is we have like a really nice quiet garden, sensory garden. We've got a summer house.
Amazing.
We've got allotments, a lot of space for people to be on their own.
But totally not to do with the day-to-day of life,
calming
places that are meant to be to relax, to have conversations, to just kind of let some of that tension fall off you and just have a quiet moment to yourself. I think that's important.
And I think sometimes we need to forget about our day-to-day life. It's just a really stressful world that we live in, and we don't have enough time to breathe. And one of the big things I take from some of the guys and girls walking through our doors, I mean, someone said it last week. He was really stressed when he came in, and he's like, when I walk through the doors into this place, he goes, I feel like I can just take a big breath and breathe.
That's lovely.
And that's it. And all we ask at the hub is everyone's respectful of each other. And we don't judge. Everyone's got their own story, and none of us are kind of like totally clean in this world, are we?
No. And anyone who says they are has a
lying.
wake-up call coming.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And I think that's really crucial, and to being just a part of a community is understanding that everybody's going to go through something. It might look different for everybody, and we might not always fully be able to understand each other, but all we have to do is acknowledge that someone is going through something, and even if it's perhaps we don't fully get why, you don't need to know, that's how they're feeling at that moment, and you just need to, just like you said, sometimes just listening without, you don't have to say a thing, just knowing that you're there to listen to somebody is enough at times. So it's really, really important. I know earlier you said sometimes there's no point really wondering about what ifs. Because what ifs, I don't know if you're the same. You can waste a lot of time on that, a lot of thought, a lot of wasted energy, just what if, and that kind of sliding doors moment, what if I'd taken this path instead of that, and we can get very in our heads about it. And for me, I think often it's not always worth entertaining, because it can kind of do a bit, you can get really in your head about it, and actually it does more damage than good. But did something like you've created exist when you were at your lowest? Was there anything like this around to turn to?
Not that we could find, no. I mean, there's a really good network within the veterans community, especially like breakfast clubs. They'll meet up, once a month at various locations, but I went to one or two, and through no fault of their own, it wasn't for me at the time. It was really hard. I wasn't there to sort of talk about the grandeur of the good old days. I was really struggling and needed a community. So there was nothing like the hub at the time, and the reason we set that up was quite selfish at the time. I wanted to help myself. I'd been diagnosed with this thing that I didn't understand. I had my career ripped away from me. My family life was falling apart. I had a daughter, that I finally saw for the first time and realised how wonderful she is, and what an amazing privilege it is to create, a living
absolutely,
being.
yeah.
So I thought I need to help myself somehow, and that's what I did. Going back to the what ifs, that is a big issue, I think, because that like goes down the route of the survivor's guilt, and that leads to problem. The what ifs can lead to really serious problems. I was hung up on what ifs for years, and even now, I still think about the what ifs. Last night when I sat in my hotel room, I was thinking about the what ifs. And it's really hard not to get dragged into that, but you've got to find a way to ground yourself and bring yourself back, because we can't change what's happened at all. You really can't. All you can do is take ownership of what's happened, and try and be the best possible person you can. And understand that tomorrow's a fresh day, isn't it? When people talk about taking their own lives, and some people do openly talk about it, I try and remind them that this is a very short piece of their life. And we don't know what's going to happen in a year's time, 2 years time, 3 years time. It could all change. So talking is such a key point of this.
I think people like yourself are just so crucial, because you have been through that, and I think people listen more sometimes when they are talking to someone who has actually been through something, if not more severe than what they're going through. And I think it's the same with any profession. Like you say, we're talking about dentistry here today. To know that somebody has gone through what you've gone through and come out the other side, and that's not to say that you're going to have great days constantly and life is, you're always on a high and everything's always brilliant. Of course, like we said earlier, everybody has struggles, and we're just human. We can't stop these feelings building up sometimes. But to know that you've built this hub, you've come back from a really tough time in your life, and you've bounced back, and you've got this life now that I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you probably once didn't think you'd have. And now you're here. It's crucial to have people like you in spaces where mental health struggles are rife, I think. So even if you say you set up the hub for what you said were selfish reasons, I think it was probably unselfish, because it then meant that you could end up being there for the people that you perhaps felt that you hadn't been before. So
I appreciate that.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just a little bit of I just wanted to.
I don't see it like that, but I appreciate that. I really do.
Yeah. It sounds, what you've got down there sounds absolutely incredible, and I think if something similar, and I think mental health conversations are being had within dentistry, which is really important. But I think there are a lot of people who shy away from having the conversation still, and I'm not saying that's necessarily just an issue in dentistry, but I think it could be really helpful to have more spaces like similar to what maybe you've created down in Weymouth, for people to come together to talk specifically and about themselves and how they're feeling, because I think bringing it up in a staff room while having a sandwich isn't always the best way to.
No, it isn't, but it does start the conversation, and you only need one or two people within that profession, the dentistry profession, to and I don't know how it works in dentistry. I don't know if you've got like a sort of really well-known dentist, for instance, that everyone learns from or looks at as being a peer.
There's a fair few.
And if there are, then it's people like that. If they can speak out and share their story, then people will listen. And obviously, sharing your story and people listening doesn't make everything okay. There has to be a lot of emphasis on the individual as well, because you can talk about mental health all we want, and we can throw all the support that we want out there, but the individual must feel comfortable accessing that support and understand that they need to take that first step. But there's a lot of people that will walk with them and help them once they've taken that first step. It's the hardest thing to do is putting your hand up and saying, I mean, you look at someone like me, I was literally like a cliche from all the movies of the worst soldier ever. I drunk, smoked, loved guns. Thought there was nothing better than just driving around the dirt. I was horrible. It was terrible. I was living in my own little, world, and like I said, I was so cliche, and I wasn't the sort of person that anyone would have expected to go, actually, I'm really struggling.
I see what you're saying.
And what I found was, through me doing that, a lot of people that I knew started reaching out to me, which was key.
Yeah.
And that was really important as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I've spoke to people from all eras. The oldest person we've supported was 105. Yeah, he was a World War II veteran.
That is
who,
incredible.
when we met him, his caregivers said, he won't talk to you. He doesn't talk. He never comes out of his room. Myself, and a good friend of mine, Tony, went to see him, and we sat down with him. And as soon as he realised who we were and what we had done, he talked to us, and he started crying. And he said he had lived with the guilt of his actions and coming home. That his was survivor's guilt, yeah? So he made it back when none of his friends did. And he had lived with that all them years, right? And that was probably, he said, the first time he had cried about it. So, it was a really powerful and emotional moment.
It must have been that a man of that age has just bottled that up for so long.
I can't imagine it. Yeah, I can't imagine it, which is why I'm so keen to get people to talk about mental health and not bottle things up, and understand that it's perfectly natural to be stressed in certain situations.
Yeah.
Understand that if you're exposed to something traumatic, that it's perfectly normal for your brain to go a bit skew-whiffy at times. Yeah, and for you to have a WTF, I was trying not to swear a moment. Yeah, right.
It's okay, you can do it.
Yeah, but it is it's perfectly normal.
Yeah.
And if you're talking blue light services, armed forces, not everyone within these services, but some of them are exposed to a lot more stress than other, more than you would do in your average job. Yeah, whether that's just by deployments, whether it's because of conflicts, whatever that is. So it's only normal for people to become stressed, I think, anyway.
No, totally.
And I remember back in the day, it was, the not talking attitude was horrendous. It was, oh crikey, I've just seen someone blown up. You'd be given a slab of beer, drink the beer, you'll be all right. So in that, you automatically associate alcohol with making yourself feel better, which is why I've got that. I have an issue with alcohol. I can't get enough of it. And it's terrible.
Yeah, no, but it's a coping mechanism.
Yeah, no, I think that is my issue. I can't get enough of it.
Yeah,
the pub shut too early.
Yeah, it's honestly it's one of those, I think. Not that alcohol was what we're talking about, but just I think it is a lot of people turn to it because it's so freely available. It's like you say, I think it's definitely in your community and the area you worked in, but I think in a lot it's what people, I'll have a tough day and all I'll think of is I'll just have a glass of red wine when I get home. I associate that with unwinding, with just being able to, because it does relax you, it has that chemical, it messes with your head and makes you feel releases all kind of, and then obviously ultimately it's a depressant, so then it has
sad music comes on and
so it's something that I think a lot of people probably abuse to varying degrees, and it's probably
absolutely.
not, people probably don't realise that is something that's
I grew up in, and when I first joined the armed forces, it was in an era where it still wasn't talked about. If you were a grown man and you said I'm struggling with mental health, you were literally laughed at.
I don't doubt that.
I don't know why that is, because it seems to be more male dominated than female dominated, that side of things.
Huge problems, man.
And they, like my friends who killed themselves, they left notes, and the thing that came out of one of their letters was they just had no one to talk to. They were too scared to talk about their issues. I remember after a friend of mine was killed, and I was really struggling with the whole concept of him not being there. Seeing that empty bed space, because 1 minute he's there, next minute he's gone, and it's just like a really surreal experience. And I had a bit of a meltdown, and the way that some people dealt with that at the time was they stuck me in a room with 2 other guys, and they brought in 3 weapons that were covered in blood that belonged to our friends. And they said, clean them weapons, get out your system.
Okay.
You can't use them weapons again.
Yeah.
Right? They were unusable.
Yeah.
But they made us clean them.
Yeah.
And I was digging my friend out of it, one of them. And I think that enforces in you, that kind of sets you off down a certain path.
Yeah.
where you think this is how you deal with problems. Yep. You meet violence with violence. You know, you deal with trauma by putting yourself through more trauma.
Yeah.
Isolate yourself.
Yeah.
You know, you drink, you self-abuse. You know, you over-medicate. And a lot of guys do over-medicate, self-medicate with alcohol, over-the-counter drugs. You know, illegal substances.
Yeah.
You know, people do this, and that is another issue with mental health as well. There's only a few counties in the UK where they have dual diagnosis teams.
Okay.
Okay.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it's crazy. So, like where I live in Dorset,
Yeah.
if you're self-medicating with alcohol or drugs to manage your mental health, the mental health teams won't touch you until you deal with the alcohol and drugs. But if you've got a mental health problem, the alcohol and substance misuse teams won't touch you until you've dealt with your mental health.
It's like, which doesn't really make sense. You need a sort of more holistic approach to that
Yeah,
overall
some
issue.
counties are brilliant, and they've like got these dual diagnosis teams because they go, hold on, you know, they're
probably also
they're connected.
If it's always about money, isn't it? It will save them money in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know for a fact 2 people that have killed themselves purely because they kept getting pushed around in circles.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just a shame. Yeah.
I was going to ask you actually, from a patient perspective, I think it would be really good for you to share how dental teams can better facilitate veterans in dental practices, what they might need to, ways that veterans could be made more comfortable or access could be made more obvious. Is there anything that comes to mind for you on that one? Do you know?
I don't know on that one. If I'm being brutally honest with you.
That's fine.
I mean, you know, within GP surgeries, you can get veteran-friendly accreditations. Okay.
Do you find that helpful?
Well, it's not helpful to me as an individual, but what that in theory means is, if you register as being a veteran and you go to see a GP and you present with whatever it is, a health issue, mental health, whatever is going on, they see on the file you're a veteran and they know actually there's a few other routes we can take here. There's,
Yeah.
And I don't know if that would work within the dentistry sector.
Yeah, it's no, I didn't know that was existed actually.
Yeah, and another thing is making it easier to join dental surgeries, I think, because veterans as a whole are quite nomadic. The nature of the job is you move from place to place.
Yeah.
And you don't really have any ties to one area, if that makes sense. So making it easier to join. Join a dental practice. And the other thing is, a lot of us don't know how to. Like, I was very lucky because I joined late in the day. I joined the reserves, The only reason I didn't join the regulars in the end was because that first experience bonded me with the men that I'd served with. So I wanted to stay working with them. But, a lot of men and women leave the armed forces. They come out and all of a sudden, they've got to join dental surgery, they've got to pay bills.
Yeah.
They've got to find a GP. It's new, so understanding that as well.
Okay, that's great.
And I think, I've got, I can think of a few people off the top of my head now who can't be in confined spaces or have too many people around them. So a simple little thing like just saying, do you want us to leave the door open?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's really, really helpful.
That makes all the difference.
Just being aware that there may be some little tweaks in the space that can be made.
Do you want us to leave the door open, and do you want us to make sure that you can get up and walk out that door if you want to? Yeah, so we're working from the sides of your back.
Yeah.
Things like that matter.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that. That's really that's really, really beneficial for those who are tuning in. Right. I just want to finish off with a final question. And I've been asking a lot of our guests this same one, which is, what is the best piece of advice you've ever been given? You can take a minute with that one. I have just thrown that at you.
But that wasn't good advice, actually. I ended up in a lot of trouble. Oh, crikey, that's a real tough one, isn't it?
You know what? You just...
Do you know, I possibly, I think, I was going through, totally unrelated to anything to do with the armed forces or my mental health. And I was going through a real tough time. This is years back. And my dad had a chat with me. And I think I was being really tough on myself about something. And he just said to me, son, everyone's going to make mistakes in lives. He said, everyone. He said, all them people you see on TV that look like they've got perfect lives, they haven't. and he said to me, so it's okay to make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
He said, what matters is what we learn from them mistakes and how we move forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, he said, and I said about ownership earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you,
taking
so
accountability.
he basically said, take ownership
Mm-hmm.
of everything you do. Yeah, the bad, the good, the in between. He said, you take ownership of that, and he said, you carry on moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
He said, you can't change what you've done.
Mm-hmm.
And and he funnily enough, he passed away a couple of years later, and so it kind of rang true. He said, life is incredibly short.
Yeah.
It's going to be gone before we know it.
Mm.
So, and to me, it sounds like really strange advice, but I took that on board.
Mm.
We're all going to make mistakes, take ownership of it, move forward. And also just from my own perspective, don't judge.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's key, yeah.
Yeah, I've been on the receiving end of being judged, and it's horrible.
Mm.
We've all got backgrounds. We've all made mistakes. Big, large, small, medium, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But we also all deserve a chance to move forward with our lives.
Yeah.
And that is it, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. That
Well,
was
thank you.
really good advice there, I think.
Really?
Something
Thank you.
I'll definitely take forward with me as well. Andy, thank you so much for coming on
My
today
pleasure.
and being so
Thank
honest
you
and
for having
open
me.
about your experiences. It's as you said perfectly. It requires people like yourself to step forward and sort of be very honest and candid about what they've gone through in order for a lot of other people to take that first step. So I appreciate that.
And people need to know it's okay to be nuts. Makes life more interesting.
I love that. It's a great conclusion to the conversation. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Andy.
No, thank you.
Cheers.
All right.